Hello and welcome back to the channel for another Doctor Who video. The latest missing episode animation, The Abominable Snowmen, is out now, and I was lucky enough to go to the premiere of this brand new reconstruction at the BFI a couple of days before its release. This was my third BFI event, so I've managed to get to all of the ones this year so far. So my first one was the Revelation of the Daleks screening back in March. I went to that with Miles. I then went to the Dalek Movies double bill in June with Oscar. And then the Abominable Snowmen, which I wasn't actually planning to go to start with. I was going to give it a miss basically, just because these events are quite expensive to get to. Not the events themselves, like all the associated costs of accommodation and trains and stuff from where I live. But then I was kind of idly flicking through the BFI website a few days beforehand. I saw there were some return tickets. I was tempted, and then I saw some cheap accommodation as well, just online, and I thought, right, okay, I'm not going to miss out. I'm going to go and see the Abominable Snowmen on the big screen at the premiere in all its glory. So as per, it was a fantastic event, both the screening itself and everything that happened afterwards in the bar with the quiz of Rassilon and everything else, and then the people I met. I mean, just going straight from the off, the screening itself, the sort of preamble beforehand from Justin and Dick, who both work at the BFI. They're such a fantastic double act. It's always great to see them. They always put a smile on your face and get some laughs from the audience. So that was fantastic. We then moved into the animation itself, which was shown in two parts. So first of all, we saw parts 1 to 3 as like a little block. Then there was a loo break where you could, go to the loo and have a breather and get some water or whatever, and then they showed the final 3 parts, parts 4 to 6. We were also treated to a little musical interlude in between, in the loo break. In fact, I'd kind of gone to the loo and then I heard clapping and stuff going on inside the cinema itself. I was like, oh my god, what's going on? What am I missing? So I went back inside, and Jess Jerkovic of Dudley Simpson is Doctor Who fame from across the pond, who'd come over especially for the screening, he was giving us a little musical interlude on the piano, which was very, very nice indeed, just to sort of fill that gap between the two parts, the two showings of the animation itself. I think I must have missed the start of this because I've disappeared to the loo, like I say, but I did manage to catch the Abominable Snowmen suite which he played, which comprised Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and the noise of the Yeti spheres, the sort of or whatever it is, the sort of 2 notes. So that was great, and we also heard from Jess a bit later on as well, but I'll come to that in a bit. So after the screening itself, we heard from Chris Chapman, who's helmed the brand new documentary for the Abominable Snowmen, Troughton in Tibet. And we were also treated to the first, I think, 7 minutes or something like that of the documentary, which looks absolutely fantastic, particularly on the big cinema screen with all these sweeping drone shots of Snowdonia and of the landscape where they filmed, but obviously filmed more recently with the more modern cameras and equipment and stuff. It looked truly amazing, and the interviews and stuff as well with Fraser Hines and having the TARDIS there. I'm really looking forward to watching the rest of that when I eventually get my hands on the steelbook. We also had a brief panel from some of the people that have worked on the animation, including Gary Russell, who basically sort of headed up the whole thing and directed and executive produced, I think, as well as Rob Ritchie, who did the TARDIS interiors, the 3D TARDIS models, and another guy as well, I think called Johan, who worked on the animation as well in some capacity. I can't quite remember exactly what he did. That was very interesting, to hear about the behind-the-scenes side of things, and particularly how this latest batch of animations has come to an end, seemingly, as well. That was confirmed, basically, there aren't any more of these in the pipeline, at least from this particular creative team who've been working on them over the past few years. But it was nice for them, I suppose, to have a final hurrah, to tell some behind-the-scenes tidbits and bits and pieces, to set the record straight on that, and also to receive a round of applause from the audience as well for all the work they've put into these projects over the past few years. Obviously, with a story like The Abominable Snowmen, which was 55 years ago, there aren't that many people still around who can attend events like these as guests. And so probably because of that, really, there weren't any other guests, apart from the animation behind the scenes people. I think Fraser Hines was like a different convention that day. Otherwise, he might have been there perhaps. But apart from him, there aren't that many other actors, if any, I think, from the original production still around who could have kind of come up and said something about the story. So That's a bit of a shame, compared to the previous BFI events I've been to, to not have that panel there with people from the original production. But at the same time, it's completely understandable, and just the nature of doing events for 60s stories, I guess, compared to the relatively more recent stuff. You don't have many options for that sort of thing, sadly. So on to the animation itself, which was obviously the main event of this. What did I think of it, of this brand new reconstruction? Well, I hadn't experienced the Abominable Snowmen in any form prior to this, whether that be through the Target novelisation or listening to the original soundtrack or telesnap reconstructions or anything. I hadn't got round to doing that yet, so I was going into it fairly cold. This was basically my first exposure to the story itself. I'd read about the behind the scenes of the production, but I hadn't actually experienced the story itself. And overall, I had a great time with it, to be honest. It was just great to see it on the big screen, really, to see a premiere, something that no one else has ever seen before in terms of this new reconstruction. To watch that for the first time in an audience of Doctor Who fans was a very special experience. I thought the animation was perfectly fine. I didn't have any major issues with it or anything. I think, one thing that worked particularly well was having the blend of 2D, characters and whatever, and 3D landscapes or 3D props, things like the Yeti spheres or the Buddha statue or things like that. There was a nice blend and a nice approach there, I think, kind of blending all these things together, which worked really nicely and served the story well. And I think as well the story kind of suits the animated style in a weird sort of way, with things like the Yeti or the landscape or Troughton in his fur coats. Those things just look very natural in this style, almost like an old sort of Tintin comic or something like that you can imagine, from yesteryear or whatever, or like an old animated cartoon show or something. It works really nicely, and so I didn't really have any major reservations with the animation. I know there are some things that they've taken liberties with, like Padasambhavar, or whatever he's called. He looks different to how he did in the original production. Like people have said, he does end up kind of looking a bit like a sort of Scooby-Doo villain or a Scooby-Doo character. Same can be said of the Yeti, which appears as well at the end, the sort of quote-unquote real Yeti, which Travers goes off running after. These things do look more stylized than they would have done in the original production. But like I say, I think that kind of works in its favour almost. It kind of fits this tone, this mood, this style, and gives it a nice sort of charm, really, I think. To be honest, it's not something that offended me personally. It's not something I'm going to be losing sleep over or anything. Maybe other people will, I don't know. One nice Easter egg which they have snuck in there is the sort of sphere from the Snowmen, the 2012 story with the Great Intelligence. They've kind of put that there in Padma Thingy-Bob's chamber, just in the background, really. It doesn't play a massive part in the plot. Yes, they do sort of end up smashing it up at the end, so that they've taken some liberties there. But ultimately, it blends into the background there as part of the furniture, part of the set dressing. It doesn't have any major bearing on the plot. But, it's nice to have it there nevertheless as a little Easter egg to kind of suggest that almost, it's been transported from Victorian London, from the event of the Snowmen, all the way to Tibet, and then it kind of gets smashed up here, and then the Great Intelligence's story continues from here on, into the Web of Fear, and then subsequently into the Bells of St. John and the Name of the Doctor. I think that's really nice as well, that we've got this complete set of Great Intelligence stories now. You can almost do like a Great Intelligence box set with those stories that I've just mentioned on. And certainly, speaking from the perspective of a newer fan who first encountered the Great Intelligence, in those Matt Smith stories, in the Snowmen, Bells of St. John, Name of the Doctor, it's nice to have gone back, to Web of Fear last year with the new animation of part 3 of that, and this as well a year on, just to fill in those missing pieces really of the Great Intelligence's timeline, to piece everything together, to be able to go back and see, both those stories in some form. It is fantastic, and to have that complete set of Great Intelligence stories, like I say. Obviously, The Abominable Snowmen is a classic in its own right as well, just because of the Yeti and because of Troughton's fur coat and because of the location shooting and everything. There's so much that makes it a really sort of seminal and significant and iconic production. And so from that more general perspective as well, it's just fantastic, to have it available to watch in some form at long last. So that was the bulk of the event, really. I mean, we did have the quiz of Rassilon as well afterwards, which was great, and it was great to see people in the bar as well, both people I'd seen before, regulars at these events, people like Dave or Adam or whoever, and other people as well, people I hadn't spoken to before, like Jess. It was great to talk to Jess on a couple of occasions, and also a former Big Finish actor as well, who just randomly appeared towards the end of the evening. That was really interesting too. It was great to see Josh again as well, who I first met at the Revelation of the Daleks screening back in March. You might remember him from that video. That was really nice, to have a familiar face there, to do the quiz with, and to wander around the bar with as well, trying to talk to people, including Gary Russell towards the end of the evening, very briefly. That was really great to actually sort of get to meet him in person and to say hello. So yes, all in all, a fantastic event, as usual with these. I always like to try and get to them if I possibly can. Indeed, there is another one coming up relatively soon, at the 29th of October, a screening of The Time Meddler to coincide with the upcoming Season 2 collection box set. And I am hoping to get to that one as well, all being well. I'll leave links in the description to the DVD, Blu-ray and steelbook of this brand new animation of the Abominable Snowmen, just in case you haven't looked at it yourself yet and fancy giving it a go. You get the animation on there in black and white and in colour. You get this brand new documentary as well, Troughton in Tibet. You also get the surviving episode, episode 2, a brand new restoration of that, and I hear that looks fantastic. Plus a load of other stuff as well, like snap reconstructions of the remaining episodes and other bits and pieces like that, basically. So fantastic package overall, lots of stuff on there to get your teeth stuck into, and well worth picking up if you haven't already. If you have watched the new animation, then please let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Please also like the video if you have enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more content like this in the future. And if you want to go one step further, you can support me on Patreon via the link in the video description. But until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.